Thank you, everybody, again, for taking time to join us. Again, my name is Tabitha Montgomery. I have the pleasure of serving over at the Powderhorn Park Neighborhood Association, myself and Grace and Hannah and Ashley in partnership with our board members. I'm going to have I have a small role to play tonight. I won't be talking long, but I'm going to do some quick intros. But before we get started, I just wanted to make sure that I acknowledged a couple of things, which is we know myself and our panelists and our co-host tonight, the leadership over at Can Do in Corcoran, that there's a lot happening in our community tonight. Our intention of continuing to hold this space is not because we believe that our present is not as important as continuing to have conversations about our future. We believe that both are essential, and we believe that we can do both. And with that, I will simply reiterate that tonight's conversation is entitled Co-ops and Collectives. How do we basically invest in economic justice at 38th Street and Chicago and beyond? And in order to have that conversation tonight, we have a stellar panel that will be really driving the conversation. And before we get to that, I just want to ask that Carmen Means, who is the Executive Director of the Central Area Neighborhood Development Organization, and Alicia Smith, who's the Executive Director of the Corcoran Neighborhood Organization, if you both wonderful ladies could kind of give the community a wave so that they know that you're here and in this space, holding it down with me and Grace, that would be great. And from there, I would just want to thank you again for your time. And I'm going to turn it over to Grace, who's going to do a quick intro to our panel, and then we will get going for tonight. I will say this, I'm sorry, just a couple of things in terms of housekeeping. We are recording, which we hope that most of you saw on the intro screen as we started. We ultimately encourage you to drop your questions as you develop them into the chat. We, as a courtesy to our panelists, we don't allow the chat to be public, so we don't create an unnecessary distraction as they're sharing their lens and their expertise and their stories. And from there, we will, after they give their intro and overview, we will have only one question as the host to kind of kickstart the conversation, and then should leave plenty of time to hopefully get to many community questions as possible. Please, please, please put your questions into the chat. And like I said, we will make sure that we get as many of them answered tonight as possible. Those that we are not able to get answered tonight, we will do our level best to partner with our panelists to see if they can provide an answer after tonight's meeting. Again, thank you for your time, and I'm turning it over to Grace.
Thanks, Tabitha. Hi, everyone. My name is Grace Berkey, and I work at the Powderhorn Park Neighborhood Association with Tabitha. I'm going to really quick introduce our panelists to you. First, I just want to say how grateful we are to have them, not only to share their expertise, but also as community members who live in Powderhorn or have lived in South Minneapolis, have ties in this community, have previously served on the board of PPNA as Christina has. We're so lucky to have so many folks in our community who are doing this work alongside us and looking to invest in our community. So with that, I'm going to have each of the panelists introduce themselves specifically, and then they'll also each get an opportunity to share a little bit with what they do. But our two panelists are Christina Nicholson. She works over at Nexus Community Partners and is going to talk a little bit about co-ops. And Henry Rucker is our other panelist. He works for the Project for Pride in Living, PPL, you may know it as, and he's going to talk to us about some collective lending programs that they have. So I'll turn over to each of them. Christina first to introduce themselves better than I can, and then we'll give them each a chance to present.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Grace, and thank you, Tabitha, for having me be part of this community discussion tonight. Henry, really excited to hear what you have to share as well. So thankful to be in community with you also. At a really brief level, just to introduce myself. As Grace mentioned, my name's Christina Nicholson. I live here in Powderhorn. I've lived in the Powderhorn community for over 20 years now and have served on the PPNA board, have volunteered at the park, have eaten a lot of Dairy Queen, and I'm really happy to be a part of the community. What I'm going to be sharing with you tonight is a very high-level overview of some different kinds of cooperatives, and specifically the work I'm doing now is in worker ownership cooperatives where businesses can sell their businesses to their employees as a way of succession planning, or employees can look about raising capital themselves to buy their own business. So we'll get into that in a little bit, but with that, happy to be here. And Henry, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Christine. I appreciate that. And I want to say thank you to Grace and Tabitha for inviting me on this great opportunity. My name is Henry Rucker. I'm the lead homeownership and financial coach for Project for Pride in Living, better known as PPL. We're on 11th and Franklin. That's where I office out of, but unfortunately due to COVID, I'm working from home, but I do live in the Powderhorn community. I've been a Powderhorn resident for 20 years now, and I'm a proud graduate of South High School, class of 1988. So born and raised in South Minneapolis, and been a banker in the community for many years. And about 12 years ago, I actually got introduced to Lutheran social service by Rapa from community from Nexus. So a very small world. But I'm excited to be with you guys tonight because I think there's some great opportunities that we offer at PPO, and it's through a lending circle. It's a way to help people build credit and save money. It's something we've been doing in our community for years, but this is something that's been transformed into a new program out of Mission Asset Fund in San Francisco that allows you to still do what the community has been doing, but also take full credit on your credit report for that. So I'll explain about that later, but my passion is a South Minneapolis kid, and born and raised, and I will probably always be a South Minneapolis kid. Thank you, and I turn it back over to you, Christina.
Terrific. I love it. All that South Side vibe is really good. So Grace, I did want to share my screen. So I'm going to go ahead and see if I can grab that now. And everybody, if you can, somebody can give me a nod. Henry, Carmen, can you see the other screen?
We can't see it yet. Oh,
there we go. How about that?
Yep, there it is.
Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about employee ownership tonight. To do that, I wanted to give a very high-level scan of the different kinds of cooperatives that exist in the United States and touch on cooperatives a little bit internationally. I do also want to touch a little bit on the history of the cooperatives in the United States, both formal and informal, and recognize that a lot of the structures we're going to talk about tonight do operate within a lens of white supremacy. So I think in this moment, we would be remiss if we didn't understand that that is a frame that operates consciously and unconsciously in this country and so much of what we do. So I will talk about these concepts. I'm going to touch on some other resources that folks may be interested in. And then I certainly want to hear from community members if they have questions, and want to acknowledge that this is a very light conversation, and I welcome the opportunity to talk with you folks more. So as I mentioned earlier, I work with Nexus Community Partners. My area, the Worker Ownership Initiative, is a part of Nexus, which has many different programs that operate within it. Let me get into that just a little bit. So Nexus as an organization supports strong, equitable, and just communities in which all residents are engaged, are recognized as leaders, and have pathways to opportunities. We understand that the key to building more engaged and powerful communities of color lies in the interconnectedness between authorship, leadership, and ownership. The part of Nexus that I participate in as a program manager is the ownership piece, thus Worker Owner Initiative. What we do at Worker Ownership Initiative is we advance employee-owned business models, and we do that as a tactic for community wealth building. So the idea behind cooperatives is that they are used by the folks that own them, and so that money stays in community, as opposed to a more traditional corporation where shareholders use a more extractive model where whatever they invest, they then take profits out. We help existing businesses sell to employees and convert into worker cooperatives. We also start with startups. So some of the space that I'm going to be talking about tonight is the both and for existing businesses, and then for folks who have been working either in a mutual aid space at George Floyd Square or are starting businesses and thinking about whether or not they may have community members or peers that want to invest in that. Some of the local businesses we've worked with recently include Black Table Arts, which is an emerging art space that opened up right off Hiawatha. We also are specifically focused on businesses in the Twin Cities with a BIPOC employee base. So what we focus most of our work on is really trying to focus on businesses where there are BIPOC staff, how to grow that staff, and then how to help that BIPOC staff and the rest of the staff grow into owners of that business so that they're growing and retaining wealth in their communities. So again, I'm going to do a really thin high level scan tonight of different kinds of cooperatives and dig a little bit into worker ownership. And you will hear my puppies in the background. So welcome to working from home. So the types of co-ops that people are most familiar with in the United States, the first one is consumer co-ops. The ones that most people are familiar with here in the Twin Cities are cooperatives like Seward, Wedge, and the retail cooperatives that are member owned. A second one is worker cooperatives, which is the area I focus on. They're the closest worker cooperative to us is the Hub Bike Co-op. That's right down by Target and the former 3rd Precinct. Producer cooperatives are another kind of co-op. One that you may not know is a producer cooperative is Ocean Spray. So next time you go buy cranberry juice, know that you are participating in a cooperative economy. Also, Organic Valley Milk is also a co-op. There are also purchasing or shared service cooperatives. One that you may not know is a co-op is Ace Hardware down on 38th and what is that, Nicollet. So again, cooperatives are throughout our community. We don't always recognize them as co-ops when we see them. And then there are also multi-stakeholder cooperatives. Some of those include international co-ops. So there's Mondragon Co-op in Spain. There are solidarity co-ops in Quebec, which have that structure of multi-stakeholder. They are an emerging format here in the United States. One that we work with is called Oberon, and they are a cooperative corporation that has a membership that owns multiple businesses. They started in Baltimore as a place where in construction, where folks who were coming out of prison or were formerly incarcerated or having a hard time finding work, or they weren't able to find formal employment in the construction field. So Oberon originally formed as a worker co-op to help them gain leverage and a foothold in that community for equity and fair pay. Since then, Oberon's extended into other communities and bought other businesses, but everyone that belongs to Oberon is a member of Oberon, even though the individual businesses operate separately. So within that, what I wanted to say is that there really are a lot of dynamic and emerging forms of cooperatives. I think particularly in the Twin Cities and on the South Side, when the Seward store opened up across from Sabathany, there were a lot of conversations in community about what it meant to gentrify a community, who was the store for, what was the purpose of the store in the community. And so I think that over time, there's been a lot of narratives around what cooperatives do, what they look like, who they're for, and who belongs to them. I think this is also a moment to recognize that throughout history, in all communities, in all countries, there have been forms of cooperatives that have operated. If anyone's interested, there's a great book by Dr. Jessica Gordon-Nemhard called Collective Courage that is about the history of African-American cooperatives here in the United States, both formal and informal. So I think there is an intersectionality to cooperatives, to retaining wealth in communities and to building communities from the inside out. So I do hope that wherever you may find yourself in terms of your experience or your familiarity with co-ops, that I at least leave you curious to see what other kinds of models are out there and what opportunities there may be for you to work in a cooperative model or see yourself participating in a cooperative model. Really briefly, again, because this is such a high level scan, there are 3 different kinds of employee ownership models that are most common. The first one is an ESOP, and that's an employee stock ownership plans. That's when employees basically have a retirement pension that they pay into, that they get money out of when they retire from the company. I was trying to think of one that might sound familiar. One is Bob's Bread Mill. So if you buy any of the grains or flours from Bob's Bread Mill, that's an ESOP. Worker owner cooperatives, I mentioned the hub. There are over 400 worker cooperatives in the United States, and we are growing every day. And then the other one is an employee ownership trust. An EOT is similar to an ESOP. The acronyms abound. And basically that is a similar idea where you're paying into a trust. It's overseen by a third party, and they make sure that those investments grow and then are returned to employees when they retire. For the sake of brevity and for tonight, what I wanted to talk about with employee ownership, and I know you're only supposed to have like 4 things on a slide, but I wanted to get everything in there. So for worker owners, we'll use the hub because it is South Minneapolis, and I think it's one folks are familiar with. The employees own the business. That doesn't mean, common myth busting, that for every decision like what cups you're going to have in the break room, everyone sits in a big circle, holds hands, and sings. What it does mean is that there is a management structure, but when it comes to large decisions like the future of the business, where they're going to spend their budget, how big the co-op's going to get, whether or not they're going to acquire another business, what the structure of the business will look like, employees have a vested voice in that. So it is democratically run. It is one employee, one vote. Historically, across the United States, for worker owners, the benefits are that they get profit sharing. So just as if you were an investor in a corporation and you got profits based on your shares, you as an employee get profit based on the productivity and the profit of the business. On average, worker owner workspaces have wages that are 33% higher than comparable companies in different kinds of business sectors, and 53% higher job tenure. So once you're in that kind of workspace, you are the culture, you are building the future of the organization, so people tend to be more vested and stay. The benefit of the business is that there's lower turnover, obviously with higher job tenure. The employees are motivated because they own the business. So for folks that want to sell their businesses to employees, the owners do get a fair sale price. There's special tax benefits, and there's a buyer. So for every 4 businesses that sell, only 1 finds a buyer. So I think this idea for a lot of folks is that they'll either sell to a family member, or they have a unique idea or a unique business and someone else is going to want to buy it, but that doesn't always happen. And so one myth is that the employees have to raise all of the money to buy the business, and that's simply not true. What our organization does is we come in and we assess the health of the business. And if it's a business that is healthy enough to support a future and doesn't have a lot of heavy debt, then we help set up a conversion and we negotiate a loan either with banks or with community lenders. And so it isn't that employees have to carry the weight of purchasing the entire business. So I hope for those of you who may be interested, you'd be open to a future conversation about that. Lastly, obviously for communities, it does build community wealth, it anchors jobs, it grows the tax base in that community, and it creates an ownership culture. For most of us, when we own something, we act differently than, particularly when it comes to a business, than just being a frontline employee. So this is about building a future and being able to shape the kinds of business and the quality of jobs that you have in your community. So for questions, I know I talked really fast, but there's so much to cover tonight, and I really want to make sure I'm leaving space for everyone. Benjamin Tsai is my director, and he was also one of the founders of the Hub. So before he came to Nexus, so his email and my email are available on the screen if you all want to jot it down. And I know Tabitha and Grace will have it available as well. So I hope this at least piques your interest. There's a lot more ground to cover, and I would love to talk to anyone who is interested in setting up some meetings. Also, just want to put a shout out, City of Minneapolis is doing a cooperative business exploration training. Grace will put that in the chat. So there's a free CTAP class coming up if anyone is interested in learning more about co-ops and the supports that are out there in the city of Minneapolis right now. So if you're interested in co-ops, you are on trend, and we are happy to talk to you in greater detail going forward. All right, that's it. How'd I do for time, y'all?
Pretty good.
Excellent. All right, well, I will stop sharing my screen, and I appreciate the time.
Absolutely. All right, Henry, we'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. So you guys, I'm gonna use some key words that were just used, and one of them is home ownership. And here at PPL, one of my main goals is to create more home ownership among the BIPOC community. For those that may not know, Minnesota, unfortunately, is in the rare body. We're towards the bottom of home ownership between people of color and non-households of color, but yet we are a state that has in the top 1 to 4 every year in the highest credit scores. So my main role at Project for Pride in Living is to assist people to become homeowners. The reason I brought up the ownership piece is one way that we were able to figure out ways to help people build credit without using credit cards was through lending circles. In Latin America, they're known as tandas. In certain parts of the world, they're known as susus. A lot of people have participated in some form of a lending circle and just not known that they were doing it. So if you maybe go to a church, a mosque, any barbershop, beauty salon, family members, where somebody collectively takes up the money and then the money is divvied up among the group in certain different months or in certain different payout patterns, that is technically a lending circle. Sometimes people call it a money circle. So we now run those in PPL, in Project for Pride in Living. We do that, okay? And what I want you guys to think about is what's a good way to save money and build credit at the same time, right? It's very hard to do that because if you normally put money in your savings account, you're not getting any credit for that, right? You're just getting money, you put in your savings account, but it's not helping you build credit. But what the lending circle does, it helps you build credit and save at the same time, okay? This is the concept that was also used to help a lot of people start cooperatives or people save money. First time home buyers and businesses save money for a down payment on a building, for a down payment to buy equipment when they start a business. So we taking that same concept here in Minnesota and we're using it to help people get into home ownership. So what we're doing is we're challenging people in the community, may it be family members, a local church you go to, a group of childhood friends, is to call and talk to myself about ways that you can use this lending circle to help people in your family build wealth, but also say not just wealth, but financial empowerment, right? So one of the things that I love about living in the Powderhorn community in the neighborhood is I feel like I understand the community. I understand the what goes on in the community. Unfortunately, I tell people we never want to use the word hood. We want to use the word neighborhood, right? Because we actually live in a neighborhood. And we want to make sure that we're empowering people in the neighborhood to be owners, business owners, homeowners. There's nothing wrong with renting. Don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with renting. But I always tell people, if you really want to be a part of the community, sometimes own a piece of the community. Owning a piece of the community is very powerful. It allows you to sell your building. It allows you to leave that building to a family member. It allows you to employ people from the community. That's an asset. Owning a business and owning a home are true assets that typically always go up in value over time. Those are things that we want to think about from a home ownership perspective and a financial empowerment perspective, is how do we make sure that we're giving the community the tools to help them build credit, but also not maybe overextend themselves. One thing that's unique about a lending circle, if you think about your 6 best friends or 6 family members or coworkers, and everybody agreed to put up $100 a month, that pot would be $600. And people say, oh, that's not a lot of money. It may not be a lot of money in the beginning, but then that grows from $100 a month to $150 a month to $200 a month, where we've worked with some businesses that were putting up $500 to $1,000 a month among themselves. So when they went to buy that new equipment, they had the $5,000 or $6,000 that was needed to buy the equipment without having to put it on a credit card. Not saying there's anything bad with credit cards, but if you have the ability to save money and build credit at the same time, and the lovely part, there's no interest involved in the lending circles that we offer at PPL. We don't charge any fees to participate, and it's a 0% interest loan really to yourself. So I tell a lot of people, if you're self-employed or if you're W-2, it's just another way to save money and build credit at the same time. And the concept behind that is, typically most people, when they get a credit card, if you have a $1,000 limit, the max you should ever on that credit card is 30%, which is $300. That shows up in your credit report as a revolving account. When we do a lending circle for participants, it shows up in your credit report as an installment account, which allows you to not have to worry about that 30% utilization factor. So you sign up for a lending circle, it's for 6 months. On your credit report, it will show up as a $600 unsecured loan as well, which is going to be scored a little bit different than a secured loan. Then on top of that, every month it's if you pay $600 as a loan, every month when you put $100 in, it reduces that. So over 6 months, you would go from 600 to 0. And the idea is that you would repeat that again. We recommend that most people do at least one full circle of a year for lending circles. Our average circle is 6 to 8 participants, and they range from $75 to $200. But it's a great way for you to build credit, risk-free, and you do not have to come in with 6 participants. We have a lot of people that are in our homeownership program that participate in a lending circle. It's a way for them to build credit, but also maybe save up for their earnest money, save up for their appraisal, their home inspection costs. So it's another way for you to save money and build credit at the same time. And PPO pays the fee to participate. So there is a fee that the organization pays to belong to the Mission Asset Fund family out of San Francisco, but there's no charge to anybody in the community that participates with us. So here's what I ask you guys to ask yourself. What's one thing you learned about money as a child? Okay, don't have to answer that, but just think about what's one thing you learned about money as a child. And then on top of that, what's one thing we would like to teach our child or our nieces or our nephew about money? The key word I will say to you guys tonight is ownership, right? Ownership can be empowering. You can be a part of the community. And I think the number one way for us to build wealth among everybody in the community is through ownership and supporting one another and uplifting each other in all possible ways that we can. That's why I believe shopping in your own community, buying things in your community, maybe from the gas station, the cooperative, supporting your community is a great way to build up the community and bring more resources to the community. So what we're trying to do via that with the lending circle is empowering people in the community that if you are a little intimidated, maybe by going to a bank, a financial institution, that's okay. Come to PPL and we will help you build that credit or establish that base that will be needed to help you get on the grid to start establishing yourself to be in a position to get approved for a home ownership. May it be buying a business, buying a building, or buying a house, maybe a duplex, a triplex, whatever you decide to invest in by becoming an owner in the community. That's how we use the lending circles to really empower people to build that credit in a way that's going to allow them to save and also build credit at the same time. I put in the chat box and hopefully they can share. There's a great article that NerdWallet wrote about lending circles. And then also, because like I said, we work with Mission Asset Fund out of San Francisco, you actually apply on their website, but you pick PPL as an organization that you would like to work with. And the other organization here in the Twin Cities that also offers lending circles is Clues. So we're very community focused on how to empower the community when it comes to credit building tools. Thank you.
That was fantastic. Truly, Christina and Henry talk about informative. I see Andrew giving y'all some snaps. Everybody on here should be snapping, whether you got your camera on or not. That's positive pressure is what we say over at PPNA, positive pressure. No, I am delighted because I think about the more that we all understand and learn, and I will get off my soapbox in 2 seconds, is even if it didn't feel like it was directly applicable to you, you now have information that you can share with other people. You can move beyond yourself and help us to each one teach one and go old school in terms of what we're trying to do in tonight's conversation is to begin a long-term serious approach and accounting of how we think about building wealth in our community in partnership with one another. So I'm gonna stop there because I could go on all night and y'all didn't come to see me. But the first question as a part of the kickoff that I have for our panelists, and like I said, we're going to get busy going right to the questions that community members have been submitting in the chat. Is so Christina and Henry, and hopefully you both can share some insight from your perspectives, but considering what you've shared either about worker owner business models, Christina, and specifically you, Henry, the emphasis on ownership, it's specifically and lending circles as a tool to facilitate that path. What do you believe are necessary steps or tools or resources to make these economic approaches more accessible for businesses in our community, members, specifically at 38th in Chicago, and in other parts of South Minneapolis as a whole. So I know that was a lot, but if you could share with tonight's participants one or two things that you believe we as a community could be advocating for, if you will, for the resources to help these tools to be more understood and more utilized for the aims that we're here for in terms of shifting economic justice.
Henry, what do you think? Do you want to go first?
Well, I would say
go
one
for
thing.
you.
Yeah, one thing I try to really stress to a lot of participants that I work with, or when I go out in the community and talk, is let's understand really what credit is, right? Credit is really something that you are giving today and with a promise to pay for it in the future, right? So a lot of times we find ourselves buying things on credit card, knowing we have to pay for it later. But the idea, the system has told us that I'm going to let you charge $500 and I'm going to send you a bill for $500, but I'm only going to ask you to pay $25, $30. So that's going to allow you to then get yourself a little bit in debt and take a longer time to pay that off. The one thing I like to see us do is really let people know there are different forms of credit. Lending Circle is one form of credit. I also work with MCCD in Minneapolis, right there on Chicago Avenue. They have a small credit builder loan for $240 and you pay $20 a month. There's a lot of tools that are out in the community that a lot of people just don't know, because I'll be honest, you guys, you're not going to see PPO run an ad during March Madness about lending circles. We don't have the capacity to do that. Whereas Visa, Capital One, I don't want to, but they're going to do that. They're trying to figure out ways to get you into debt. We're trying to figure out ways to help you not get into debt, or if you do get into debt, it's positive debt, such as homeownership or owning a business, which then can produce income for you in the future. So I would say share this information. As Tabitha said, it may not be perfect for you right now, but it might be for a coworker, it might be for a family member, it might be just for anybody that you just say, hey, I'm having a problem doing my credit. Oh, have you thought about this? That would be a great way of us really making sure that we're spreading this information, because what I always tell people, we want to plant the seed, and then if we water it, eventually it's going to grow.
And I would say, experience co-ops in a way that adds value to your life. So again, Black Table Arts is a cooperative. It was funded in part by a nonprofit. So there are hybrid models in our community here in South Minneapolis, focused on growing BIPOC community and encouraging BIPOC artists to be their own businesses. I also would say that for a lot of folks, there are obstacles to seeing themselves as participating in cooperatives. And I promise you, you participate in co-ops all the time and just don't know it. So whether it's the butter you buy, whether it's the electricity or the water you use, there are a lot of co-ops around us. Credit unions are all cooperatives. So I think it really is an opportunity for us to think about what it means to own our businesses. Exactly what Henry said, be active participants in our community, in our neighborhood, and really look at this as the kind of economic engine that can help drive multiple generations of wealth. So I think we're in a moment where people start claiming ownership in a different way, and we're here for it. So I think that cooperatives and lending circles, ownership is one way to really envision yourself as being a critical participant in the community that you live in and hopefully can work in as well.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you both. So we're going to get right into the community questions. Just want to be mindful that we're going to have probably close to over 20 minutes for us to answer community questions, which I think is a lot of time. And Christina and Henry, if you could help us out by trying to keep your questions to your responses to maybe 30 seconds, 1 minute apiece. I'm not trying to accuse anybody of talking too much. I'm not. That was not an indictment. That was just a gentle nudge, because then we can get through more questions. So the first one, Christina, is somewhat goes to you. Can you talk more about options for cooperatives and community ownership around housing co-ops, community land trusts? Can you shed some insight on that?
Yes, really briefly, there are real estate cooperatives. There are some on the north side. Blue, for example, Black-led UUs are buying property on the north side. There's also the Community Land Trust. And one of the programs that we have at Nexus the North Star Cooperative Fellowship is also participating in real estate cooperatives. So there are housing co-ops in the Twin Cities. There is money available to help purchase land. And so what I would say really briefly, Henry touched on MCCD. I know that they have relationships in that space as well. I would encourage anyone to reach out to us, and we can help provide resources around housing cooperatives and real estate cooperatives and community land trusts. So there's a lot of models out there.
Thank you, Christina. And what I will add is, just as a quick note, a shout out for the second part of this series on April 29th. We will be focused on community equity investment models, and that includes real estate investment trusts, which includes housing, cooperative housing models and strategies, and some of the things that some leaders in that field are learning as, again, a way to help increase our knowledge. So the next question is related to, let's see, I think both of you might be able to speak to this. How are neighborhood organizations supporting home ownership equity? And I might then chime in on that as well. But Christina and Henry, maybe if you want to speak from the perspective of how have you seen or how do you experience neighborhoods supporting home ownership? And then I can kind of just chime in with some thought.
Okay, Henry?
I can say from what I have experienced, I think when community centers, neighborhood organizations allow you to post your information on their websites, or if they have a building prior to COVID that you could put information about the first-time homebuyer classes that you might be offering, the fact that you could meet with a financial coach and do a one-on-one session to really see where you're at financially. I think the key is that we have to be not afraid to call and ask for help. As Christina mentioned, if Nexus can't maybe do it or PPO can't do it, then we're going to send you to the organization that can assist you. And I think the neighborhood organizations can do the same thing and have been doing the same thing. We just want to make sure that we're not afraid to call and ask for help. To me, there's no right or wrong answer. If I'm not a doctor, so I need to get advice, I'm gonna go see the doctor. If I'm not a financial person, I say call somebody that can get you in front of a financial person. But I believe there's been full buy-in by the community organizations in that they're referring to partners such as PPL to make sure that we're getting you the first-time homebuyer classes and the information that you need.
I would echo that, and I would say here on the South Side, I know in Powderhorn, there's several folks that have purchased under community land trust where they own the house, but they don't own the land that the house is on. And that reduces the cost of purchasing their home significantly. We're also doing work in rural communities. So only 2% of land is owned by African Americans in the United States, only 2% of farmland. So we're looking at not only urban, but rural opportunities for folks to buy land and have partnerships to purchase that land. So not just GoFundMe, but community groups and development corporations that are interested in supporting the expansion of BIPOC communities and ownership.
Great. And the only thing that I would add is I think that I would indicate some of what Henry touched on is there's 3 ways, at least, that I believe that PPNA and that I've seen Corcoran and Can Do attempt to support equity in home ownership. The first is by sharing information related to tools that can support a person's path to home ownership. The second is trying to support pilots or programs by raising our hand to shepherd city or county resources that focuses on stabilization. PPNA is proud to be a recipient of the City of Minneapolis Housing Stabilization Pilot Program that allows us to prop up the Renter Support Fund, which is really focused on a first thing, stabilizing people where they're at so they can even be in the posture to receive information about home ownership. And then lastly, using our voice and our position when we're able and in alignment with the board to apply positive pressure on policies that have not gone far enough to get out of the way of things that prevent equity in home ownership. So those are the 3 things that I would say that I've seen most neighborhood organizations do, and certainly that PPNA is striving to do on a daily basis. The next question is somewhat of a statement. It's a 2-parter. It goes really to Henry. I love this lending circle idea. How do we do it with our neighbors? And the question is simply get in touch with PPL. Is that what you would recommend, Henry?
Yes, so you can call, I will give you guys if you want to write this down, 968-6580 is my work cell phone. 612-968-6580 is my work cell phone, or you can call PPL, the main number, and let them know you'd like to speak to somebody about lending circles, but either PPL or Clues, but we would love to have you. We're going to launch 2 or 3 in April.
That's wonderful. And Henry, once you start throwing out your digits, you made me a little nervous. I was like, listen, I am not opening. You get you some people out here calling your personal cell. I can't be responsible. Okay, so the next question, and I just want to note that if you didn't see that Grace has already dropped Henry's, I think that would be his work line, into the chat if people want to reach out directly to him. The next question is, are there lots of African-American people who participate in the lending circles? That's the first part of the question. How do we share this info with those demographics? So how do we help get that word out to groups who we believe could benefit?
So I will be honest with you guys, it was very, it was slow at start in the beginning with the African-American community, because you're putting your trust into somebody you may not know. So we had people that were participating with others and they didn't know each other. But I can say this, in the 3.5 years PPL has been offering lending circles, we have a 0% default rate. Okay, 0. We've never had anybody default on their lending circle. So that's great. And I just think it's a little bit of accountability. You're really counting on others and yourself to come to the table and hold yourself accountable. But I think the key for us has been, because it's mainly tied around home ownership, most people do not want to mess up their credit, because the end goal is to become a homeowner. So that, to me, they are even more passionate about completing the lending circle. And if somebody asked, a lot of people are doing it with family members. I have a mother and 3 of her children. I have a whole family that did it. They got 6 people. So a lot of people are coming to the table with 4 or 5 people, and then we're adding maybe 1 or 2 people to the circle.
Excellent. This is in some ways this is for both of you, really. And I think it speaks to maybe actions that you have taken already or actions that you could take. And it's, what are the conversations you are engaged in with BIPOC businesses at 38th and Chicago, in that quadrant of neighborhoods specifically? And this maybe could be in relationship to your organizations, PPL and Nexus, and maybe not necessarily you as individuals.
Well, if PPL has property in the neighborhood, so we're listening to our residents. We're also, I would say honestly, we work with other nonprofits that are in the community or organization in the community. So we're partnering up. I can't say PPL as one organization is trying to do things on their own. I think we're working together as a collective group. Paul Williams, our CEO, knows Rapal very well over at Nexus. So I would say it's really a collaboration of the nonprofits working together to serve the community on the needs that are needed in that corridor. And I think a lot of times things are done behind closed doors that a lot of times the community does not know about. But I also believe sometimes that is done for a reason. So I'll give one quick example. PPL was giving some money by a donor, but wanted to stay anonymous, right? And that money is being used to help people in the Powderhorn community that have connections to PPL, and it may be towards rental or residential. But those are things that really are not being advertised. But contact us. That's all. I mean, if you don't know, please call us and let's see how we can help you.
And for worker ownership, there's a couple different conversations we're having with, our conversations at this point are informal, and there's a couple reasons for that. One-on-one conversations we've had is there is paradoxically a lot of focus on 38th and Chicago, but unfortunately there's also a lot of trauma that people are trying to metabolize. And so we are planting seeds that we believe we can harvest in the future by having one-on-one conversations with folks, and then also talking with some individuals in the community. And I don't want to name names here and, the interwebs, but conversations with folks in communities who are in the community who are interested in starting cooperatives. Some of those are in construction, some of those are in restaurants. So it is kind of on the down low, but at the same time, we're definitely in these conversations, and exactly what Henry said, MCCD and some of the other partners that are physically located here in the community are part of those conversations as well.
And one thing that I would just raise up, which I hope is still seen as part of context, is that I know that Alicia Smith and Carmen at Can-Do have been in a lot of conversations with the current business owners, specifically at 38th in Chicago. I've had the privilege of being in some recent meetings with them. And one of the things that I just want to lift up is that we recognize that some of those business owners have immediate needs due to the loss of business in that corridor for now nearly a year. So they have immediate needs that don't, if we were to be honest, completely align with some of the tools that we're talking about now, which have more longer term implications. And what I can say is that I participated in a meeting today where even we saw that the city acknowledged that the CPED department moved forward a proposal to the city council to establish a dedicated source of forgivable loan funding to those businesses at 38th in Chicago. And I think it's up to $50,000. And continuing to try to listen to and advocate when we can as neighborhood organizations in meetings with them and on their behalf, that they get even more resources because of the truth and the reality of the disruption. And I'm not questioning why it was disrupted. I'm just simply saying that they have had an impact. Alicia or Carmen, did you want to say anything? I would just defer to you if there was any other insight that you wanted to share.
I would just say what you said was spot on, Tabitha. And one of the other things that we're doing is, in addition to the business owners located right at, in particular, the Black business owners located between 37th and 38th in Chicago, looking at that whole kind of intersection to build a collective, as we know that economically, many of those businesses have suffered, up to 75 to 85% loss. And so how do we long-term help those folks sustain where they are and not lose their business, especially given that they survived COVID, which is a big feat, which we've talked about with other business owners. Like, surviving COVID was really, that first year of COVID has really proven to shutter a lot of doors. And so we continue to work on that and build trust and build camaraderie, which I know Henry talked about, putting your trust in other people that you may not know, and maybe you don't understand their business practices. And so this is something that we're building with the coalition on 38th, with those Black business owners in particular. And then as we build out kind of the 38th Street Coalition for the business owners.
Thank you, Alicia. I think we can get to probably 2 or 3 more questions if everybody can hang with me. So the first one I think really goes to you, Henry, and then the second will be to you, Christina. Do folks need to bring their circle with them, or does PPL have circles new folks can join so that they can link up to?
Yes, if you come as an individual, we will put you in a circle with 5 other people or 6 other people, but you can come as 1, you can come as 5, you can come at 6. So if you're interested, please reach out to me, but you can come as an individual. We will place you in a circle. Can I just say one thing on the last question? Is, you guys, I don't understand. Please trust this. Social media is a huge platform to let people know about businesses in your community, about, oh, I went to this place, that place, and it was really good service, great. And other people will want to come in and support your community and your neighborhood.
Thank you, Henry. Christina, this one is specifically more of a quantitative number. So can you tell us how many BIPOC owner-owned collectives have you all supported? So I would imagine, has Nexus supported? Do you happen to know the stats on how many BIPOC owner-owned collectives that you've worked with?
I will unpack that number in a couple of ways. One, I will say collectives and co-ops, while they work together, are not inherently structured as the same kind of organization. And worker ownership is only part of what Nexus does. So as an entity, Nexus has in their North Star Fellows program, right now, I want to say they have 17 cooperatives and collectives that are BIPOC owned and operated. that they are mentoring and working with, and I'll be doing a financial training with the North Star Fellowship this Saturday. So Nexus as a whole has at least 45 BIPOC owned collectives and cooperatives that they have supported and sustained through the North Star Fellowship. We have other projects, and during the uprising, we also distributed over $7 million directly into the hands of BIPOC community members through a second granting that we processed with Black Visions Collective. So I am really proud to work with Nexus because it is an organization that does direct impact in BIPOC and specifically Black communities.
Excuse me. Thank you, Christina. Another question, I think Grace is noting that a couple of people had the same one. How are you working to implement TOPA? So for those who don't, that's an acronym for Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Agreements, and funding to make it operational as a mechanism to support ownership. Or they want to make a plug for TOPA. Well, let me make a plug for TOPA, because our board has certainly supported our ability to do so, is that we are fully down for a broad spectrum of tools, specifically renter protections, inclusive of things like TOPA, or looking at single room occupancy, or just cause eviction, and even now advancing a pathway to our citizens being able, as within the city, to vote up or down on a specific policy related to rent stabilization. So I hope that was a plug. We believe that we are in a clearly a housing crisis and a commercial affordability real estate crisis that really relies on us, and it is incumbent that we look at a broad spectrum of portfolio of tools to move beyond the moments we're in. And that's not just continuing to use the tools that we have. But Christina and Henry, if you have other things to add that are contrary, I will certainly remove you from the meeting in the last few minutes. Christina, Henry, do you have other things that you would share?
Really briefly, one thing I will share is I'm putting in contact information for North Star Black Cooperative Fellowship. That's my dog Zinnia. And so folks are interested in information specifically focused on Black-owned cooperatives and collectives. That's an access point for them. And other than that, there's so much breadth to cover. I just really hope people feel safe, encouraged, interested in continuing the conversation.
Yeah, I would say two things. If you guys, one, I would say there's a slogan, a campaign we're doing with the Minnesota Homeownership Opportunity Alliance called Get Ready, Be Ready. And a very good friend of mine that's a VP at one of the local banks here that just moved there has a saying that I always like to use. When you apply for a mortgage, it's never a hard no, it's a slow yes, okay? If somebody tells you today that you're not ready, do not let that be the end of your journey of homeownership or even starting a business. We always want to have you be in a position for financial empowerment. It may take you 6 months, it may take you 3 years. I just had a lady close 2 weeks ago that had been in my program for 3 years, but she is now a successful homeowner and has already referred some people to me. It's never a hard no, it's just a slow yes.
Well, listen, that was wonderful. Ladies, gentlemen, and everyone in between, we are at time. I want to use my time wisely and focus on thank yous, and then ask Carmen and or Alicia if they want to give a plug for the rest of the series that we're trying to do together. But like I said before, really at the top of the hour, you guys were going to be blown away with both of our panelists. Christina and Henry, we are truly deeply grateful for not only you being residents in our community, but the service that you continue to say yes to, and all of the insight that you share tonight, and putting yourself in the posture of receiving even more questions from the community so very genuinely and honestly. We thank you for your support tonight. We thank you for everybody that had the time and the wherewithal to spend an hour with us on this particular topic, because we believe there's a lot more work to do. There's a lot more education that PP&A need to do as an organization, so that we can become vessels of being able to share this information in partnership with our neighborhood partners like Can Do and Corcoran. So I'm just going to ask Alicia and or Carmen if you want to make a plug for.
Absolutely. First and foremost, thank you so much for everyone that held this space to us. A special shout out to Henry and Christina for giving us that information. And thank you for the hour. I'm zoomed out by the end of the day, so this hour was just perfect. It was kind of like an appetizer. So we appreciate you all again that shared this space with us on this Tuesday evening. We know that we have so many other things going on, but please mark your calendar for April 27th, which would be the next one that we'll be doing from same bat time, same bat channel. I don't know if
The 29th, the 20, see, she's trying to make y'all, she's trying to make y'all end up in the wrong place.
Appreciate you. April 29th, the same bat time, same bat channel, as we'll continue to discuss the economic justice and how it pertains to 38th Street and the community and equity as a large. As you all know, just real quick, we've been on the front lines of course, protesting, leading this, but if we do not really have a transfer or an ownership stake in the ground, as far as economics is concerned, you all, we really have wasted our time. Our ancestors before us, Dr. Martin Luther King, others have really shown us that about the power that we possess once we own. So again, a shout out to the community first and foremost. A shout out to Henry, shout out to Christina, and I'll pass the mic right now to no one. And so we're closing out again, April 29th, mark your calendar. Again, Corcoran, Powderhorn, thank you. Grace, you did an amazing job. And if any questions we have not answered, or you think of something late, I know I can say this, email Grace. We'll make sure that Christina or Henry, gets that opportunity to respond. Miss Tab?
Listen, you did it. You took us on home. We appreciate all of you. Have an amazing night. Enjoy Netflix or Disney Plus or whatever you do, or your kids.
Or a glass of wine.
I'll
Bye-bye.
take care now.
Excellent. Thank you so much.